What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. Only two games I'm going to cover this week. I'm going to try and keep it nice and short, starting with kind of the big talking point of the Premier League weekend. Arsenal, Brighton end in a draw and share the points. The big moment of controversy here, of course, that kind of changed the game after Arsenal had a really good first half, eventually get the goal to go ahead, is the second yellow card on Declan Rice. I don't particularly like talking about refereeing controversies. When I do talk about refereeing, I try and talk about refereeing in terms of process and the way that situations are handled, not subjective calls in terms of whether refs got it right or wrong. And this incident is a perfect example of why I do that and why consistency is so important and why these conversations that I keep bringing up are so important. Because if you take that situation in a vacuum, the series of events that transpired, if you take all the other context away, that is absolutely a second yellow card. Declan Rice got kicked because he kicked the ball away and then was hit with the follow through because Brighton were trying to take a free kick and he prevented that from happening. By the letter of the law, that is a yellow card for delaying the game. I don't see how there can be any disputing that. So let's start with that fact. Now, the frustration that I have, that I'm sure many Arsenal fans have, that I feel like Mikel Arteta has, I think I saw Bukayo Saka bring this up as well, is that these calls are not made in a vacuum. Context has to matter. Consistency has to matter. And when João Pedro kicked the ball away in the first half and was not reprimanded in any way and did not receive a yellow card, the first thought that crossed my mind was, I really hope we don't have an incident in the second half where this is going to come up again and we're going to have to wonder why he didn't get a yellow card. And sure enough, here we are, not just any incident, but a game-changing incident that brings Arsenal down to 10 men. Because this, I feel like, is something that you can be very critical of because it's not about referees making mistakes or you disagreeing with a call. This is about process and consistency. Either players get yellow cards for kicking the ball away and delaying the game, or they don't. You can't pick and choose arbitrarily when to hand out yellow cards for this, which I feel like is basically what happens most of the time. And I hope that that stops because of this, or at least we get better at it. Because both things are simultaneously true. Declan Rice has to be smarter on a yellow card because he put himself in a position where a referee could very justifiably hand him a second yellow card. And at the same time, if I'm Mikel Arteta and I see João Pedro kick the ball away in the first half, I'm going to the fourth official or going to the referee if I can have a conversation with him and saying, look, I'm going to tell my team to kick the ball away in the second half and you better not give me a yellow for it. Because you just established that that is not something we're doing in this game. And then to turn around and not just hand out a yellow card, but hand out a second yellow when we all know that basically nothing except for an egregious yellow card ends up being a second yellow. Have you ever seen a player get sent off for a delay of game second yellow? I don't think I have. Maybe I'm misremembering the one or two times it's happened in all of the hours I've spent watching soccer. Again, I don't have an issue with the referee doing that. I wish more referees would be very consistent with this. If you want people to stop delaying the game, then hold them accountable for it and start flashing yellow cards. But it has to be from minute one, and it has to be across the board. And so this all started when João Pedro wasn't given that yellow card, because that set a tone for the game, and then it changed. And if you're Arsenal, all you're asking for is consistency and a baseline to go off of in terms of how referees are interpreting situations, how they're handling games. This is not the only time stuff like this happens. People get away with delaying the game all the time, which is the justification or the explanation, the defense that Declan Rice is, I'm sure, going to give, or at least part of the thought process is he's not going to give me a second yellow for this. People get away with it all the time. That also doesn't excuse the decision because, like I said, he made a poor choice that jeopardized his ability to stay in the game. And there was nothing to suggest that that poor choice was actually going to lead to a second yellow card. Both of those things are true at the same time. And so this is why consistency is so important. You got to set a baseline, and then you got to follow through with it. It's the same frustration I have with VAR. That hopefully we're going to see some changes with this new kind of interpretation in the way that's used this season. Too early to tell. But this stuff bothers me more than anything else in officiating. Because to me, it's a waste of time to talk about, did they get the call right? Did they get the call wrong? You're going to agree, you're going to disagree. The call is what it is. As long as it's justifiable, I don't really want to spend much time on it. But this is process stuff. This is being the same referee in minute 1 as minute 90. This is treating every player the same. This has nothing to do with subjective decisions. Because when you're not consistent, stuff like this happens. And now in a high-profile game with two very good teams, one of which is desperately trying to pick up every single possible point to keep pace with Manchester City, this becomes the big talking point, and the inconsistency gets exposed. We should have just never gotten to this point. This should have been something that was just clearly defined, and referees understand how to handle and actually hold players accountable for it. But they do sometimes and don't sometimes. And so now you have a very awkward situation where in the same game, you can point to two different instances that were handled very differently. And somehow the player on the receiving end of the harsh punishment was the one already on a yellow card, which is also counterintuitive to everything we know about the way this sport is refereed. For me, this is not a passionate defense of Declan Rice as much as it is a frustration and a venting about the bad process that led to this situation. Because I'll say it one more time. Declan Rice also put himself in that position. This is not just about refereeing. You can't do that if you are on a yellow card. You can't. Because a referee might give you a second one. I would just much rather prefer to be able to sit here and say, you knew exactly what was coming when you did that, and this is 100% on Declan Rice, and he needs to take accountability. But because we're not consistent with this, because you don't 100% know what's coming, it's a combination of things. And you can't just place the responsibility on the player to know better because nobody knows what the rules actually are. It shouldn't be that hard to change. That's all I have to say about that. I keep going in circles, but I want to move on. Quickly talk about what's happening in La Liga. Barcelona have already built a 4-point lead. They defeated Valladolid 7-0 this weekend. Real Madrid did manage to pick up a couple second half goals and get a win of their own. Atletico Madrid won as well. So, like I said, Barcelona 4 points ahead of those two teams early in the season. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We will revisit later. But I do want to make this point with how good the Barcelona have looked and the fact that Real Madrid have already dropped 4 points with their 2 draws. The best indicator of a great team is regular season performance. Since the start of the 2022-23 season, so 2 seasons ago, we're talking about 80 games, 38, 38, and 4. Barcelona have more points in La Liga than Real Madrid because they were level at the start of this season, and now obviously Barcelona's got the 4-point edge. We don't want to give Barcelona any credit for winning that title. We want to go head over heels for Real Madrid because they win the Champions League all the time because they just got a Kylian Mbappe on top of Jude Bellingham. You look at the 18 that they have, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I have said this before and I will say it again. They do not dominate this league. And if you look at where they are and the players they have compared to where Barcelona is, and I really like this Atletico Madrid team, but they haven't gotten off to a great start yet, there is no excuse. And if you're going to point to Jude Bellingham's injury, my question to you is, what does that say about the club, about the players, about Carlo Ancelotti? If one individual, as brilliant as Jude Bellingham is that important to this team, that they are all of a sudden not the best team in Spain without him. You can take Vinicius, Mbappe, Bellingham, whoever. If this team is as good as they look on paper and as I feel like we collectively claim they are, losing one player to an injury is not a passable excuse. It's early. They might go on a tear, turn this around. Manchester City do it basically every season, it seems like. This is not panic mode for Real Madrid. That's not what I'm saying here. But I want to make this point, as they have started poorly after adding Kylian Mbappe, because one of two things has to happen here if this continues and if they don't run away with this league. Either we need to give Barcelona and Hansi Flick way more credit, just like we need to give Barcelona the title they won under Xavi way more credit, or we need to start actually asking Real Madrid what is going on here and not just falling for the Champions League trap of believing that is the way to determine the best team in the sport. I've talked about that time and time again. You can go find a bazillion different videos. You can go watch my video from the Champions League final. It is a different set of skills. You need to show up every single week in your league. And until Real Madrid do that, I don't have them on the same level as a Manchester City, as an Arsenal. Champions League, sure, they're right there. I mean, they might be the favorite because of what they know how to do in that competition, because of them adding Mbappe. This is different. Same thing with the Columbus Crew. I can't fully buy into you and say that you are the class of the sport, you are the team to beat, until you actually go do your job and win your league. So I'm just throwing that out there now, as Barcelona looks really, really good, and as Real Madrid have stumbled a little bit here and struggled early. Something's got to give. Either Barcelona is way better than anybody wants to give them credit for, or Real Madrid is not living up to their potential. Because if they are winning this league by 8 to 12 points, easily. And that's not where we are right now. That's all I've got for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.